We'd like to welcome you to the Heart Leader Podcast, where heart and mind align. I'm your host, Amber, and I'm here with co-host Austin, and we'd like to know, do you have a passion to make a greater global impact? Are you ready to embrace leading with heart and love? If so, join us on this journey to become heart leaders who change the world. Each episode brings heart-centered connection, building stronger relationships, communities, and businesses. Let's take a deeper dive into what it means to be heart leaders. The Heart Leader Podcast starts now. Hi, this is Amber, the host of the Heart Leader Podcast. And I wanted to take just a moment to share with you the topic of this week's podcast. It's a somewhat sensitive topic, and we care about you and value your time. Having the information in advance to be able to make a conscious choice about listening or not listening is something that is important to us. In this specific podcast, we are talking about human trafficking, really specifically about sex trafficking and about slavery. Now, we're doing this to provide information and education so that you have the opportunity to really understand what is happening in the world. The individual who is talking about this is a heart leader who is going out in this area to really make an impact. He's bringing forward a lot of information that we could all benefit from and really begin to move forward from a heart-centered space. We do hope that you choose to continue forward, but also understand that this could be a very sensitive topic for those who have any experience in this area. So it was very important to us that we let you know in advance. Should you choose to continue on, we hope that you find this episode valuable and informative. Hi, and welcome to the Heart Leader Podcast, where heart and mind align. I am your host, Amber, and today I am joined by Tom Brown. Tom is this amazing soul that I had the good fortune of meeting through mutual friends, and this soul radiates love. If you're looking for a heart leader, this is certainly one who will mirror it back to you in spades. He is the proud father of 2 children, and he is dedicated to the plight of uplifting people and just the human cause. He really feels that through business, he can touch the lives of people in so many different ways. Another avenue he does this is through sincere dedication to stopping sex trafficking. And we're going to dive deep into all of the ways that he is engaged in this. But he has so much to share, and I am so excited to introduce him. So Tom, thank you for joining, and I am just grateful that I have had the opportunity to have you as a friend in my life now and to have met you. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Amber. Great. Glad to be here, and thanks for having me. And love meeting people that when you meet them for a minute, you feel like you've known them for 1,000 years. So wonderful.
Agree. I know when we met, it was like instant connection and discussion, even in the topic that this month we're talking about, which is empathy. And the way that we first started that conversation and how I was like instantly drawn in, I was like, okay, got to know more about this person. One of our first talking points was about how we say so often to people that we're busy. Like, oh, how are you doing? Oh, I'm so busy. I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm busy. And what that invokes. So I would love if one of the first things you share is like around that conversation in particular and why you stopped saying, I'm busy. Because that was just like, oh, I love this person the moment you shared that. And then it was just instant friendship after that. So why did you stop that?
Yeah, I remember it must have been about 8, 10 years ago. A couple things was happening, right? Like I was training people on how busy I was, right? To the point where they would call me and they say, "Hey, I know you're busy," right? And then all of a sudden that would limit all conversation to the conversation being about me and not while they were calling, right? And so um so that was like my awareness to it. But then like I was watching that when I was saying busy, it would create a stress in me because when I say I'm busy, I was really saying I'm behind, right? I was really saying I am important. In fact, I'm more important than you. So it would limit flow, it would limit connection, it would limit productivity, it would you think you're creating space by pushing people away from you, but really what you are is limiting space by creating less space for people to be, in your flow, right? So I think in a selfish way, the reason why I stopped saying that was one, because I couldn't handle stress of it anymore, right? I was already stressed out enough with all the things I had going on with like kids' activities, my school, my kids' school, work stuff, and then extracurricular activities. It was like so full. And then I was like self-inducing, stress that I didn't need. So, and then second, like it really was just like, it was like the highest way of self-importance that I didn't need to have anymore, right? I'm busy, you're not, or maybe you're busy, but I'm more busy than you, therefore I'm more important. And by the way, I have a higher title than you, so therefore you have to acquiesce to my busyness, right? It's like just it was silly. So I stopped saying that, and I really did notice a physiological change in not responding that way. And then the other thing is I watched that I was creating more space, right? And I was creating more connection, and I became more effective just by discarding that and just having a new experience saying, and say, how you doing? I'd be like, man, my days are full, but what's going on? What do you need? What can I do? Right. And I'm not a saint. I don't do that all the time, but for the most part, I'm very aware of it and try and move it in that direction.
Yeah. The level of conscious awareness and mindfulness that takes, it's just impressive.
Hmm.
So I was just hats off to you. We get so caught up sometimes in how busy we are that it's just like an innate reaction that we have to say, "Oh, I'm so busy," because then it unloads it off of us, right? It's like, oh, if I say it, then whew, I can unload it and put it off my energy and onto wherever else it goes. But by recreating that reality, look what is possible. You made a different choice, and wow,
Hmm.
that just was impressive right out of the gate. And so I thank you for that, because I know I find myself doing it, or I had found myself doing it too. And so I had to change it to, oh, it's interesting. It's always interesting.
Yes, you said that the other day when we were at the conference. And I was like, well, yeah, that's right. It's a much better response than busy, right? And it is interesting and it is full.
Yeah. And I kind of equate that back to empathy in a way, because you're right when you said we're all busy. It doesn't matter who we are or what we have going on in our lives, what level we are in a company, or we all, life just right now for everyone is busy. And so if we have empathy for that and we can put ourselves in each other's shoes and realize that busy is a relative term, right? And so if we just take that out of the equation and we realize that we're all busy and we level that playing field, then we can connect in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that. And then, there's another, it's like you become limited in time. When you say you're busy, you become limited in time, right? And then when other opportunities come up for whatever that is, whether it's going out to dinner or going working out, right? Well, I'm busy, I don't have the time, right? And it's really what I'm understanding. And of course, anything I say that could sound interesting or profound, I heard somewhere else, right? So, but it's not about creating time, it's about creating space, right? So if I can create the space for things even when I don't have the time, and then somehow everything ends up getting done.
Yeah, I just love that. Now, in getting to know a little bit more of your life and your story and where you journeyed from to where you are now, keeping with that repeat theme that we're going to have this month of empathy, I heard a lot of self-empathy in that, in your journey and in your healing flow. Are you willing to share any of that, or at least how you feel empathy played a part in that, seeing and being willing to give yourself compassion and grace and feel for yourself from a different point so that you can navigate through things instead of just pushing them down into the side?
Yeah. Just when you said, I'm not expecting that question, which is fine. But when you asked that, I heard a guy say once that if how do you say, he said, if you told me what my brain told myself, I would have to kill you. Right? Like the amount of how hard that I am on myself, right? And how hard we are on ourselves, right? It's like, even when you're good, you're bad, right? Even when you've done your best, it's not good enough. Even when you have accomplished something, you don't feel the fullness of the accomplishment, because it's always like you could do something better, you could have done it different, or whatever. And it really is like, man, like, stop, right? Just stop and take the time and be like even in like a workout, right? Just be like, I walk away from work and I'd be like, oh, man, that sucked, or that wasn't good, or I could have done more. And I'm always like, good job, like, good job, right? Like, that's an experience, right? And it changes the experience of what I just did, because I'm doing 90% more than what most people are going to do in a workout anyway, right? So yeah, I think the approach for self-empathy is like, I just don't want to be that hard on myself, right? I want to challenge myself. And there's a difference between challenging yourself and being so hard to yourself that you're at diminishing returns, right? You're not, you think you're creating something within yourself, and really you're just taking away from yourself. So I don't know if that answers the question or not.
It absolutely answers the question, because that is ultimately what happens. Our inner monologue and our negative brain bias start to kind of take over, and you cycle in it. And here, I mean, when you look at, and I know you're a very humble person, but you've accomplished some pretty amazing things in your life. And I know many others who have done, who have amazing accomplishments. But if they were to say to their close business partners or their close friends, the inner dialogue that I hear they tell me that they say to themselves, even when they've accomplished these amazing things, it's like they're their own biggest competitor internally.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to take that step back and celebrate our successes equally as much, because gratitude and self-love attract so many amazing results too.
Mm. So I think I may have told you, I just went to the Optimal Health Institute about a month and a half ago, and it was just like it was a place to like reset, right? And it was you juiced for 4 days. They fed you vegan food, and I'm a meat eater, right? But I'm like, all right, I'm just going to go with this because I need the reset, right? I need to kind of start firing again the way I want to, and I knew that food was kind of having an effect on me on that. So I went, and in that experience, they have classes, and one of the classes, the woman that was facilitating it had said that we have up to 60,000 thoughts per day.
We had a little blip. We're back.
Yes.
All right. So we have 60,000 thoughts a day.
Yeah, that's what they were saying. And like if you didn't hear the last part, I just said that, I looked it up because I'm like, man, that seems like way too many. And I did the division by it. It was like, I don't know how many thoughts a minute, but too many. So I saw it to where it was either, some people were saying 6,000 thoughts a day, Dr. Google, up to 120,000 thoughts a day, somewhere around there. But let's just say it's 30 thoughts a day, right? Or 30,000 thoughts. What they all said was that out of those thousands of thoughts, only 5% of them are good thoughts. And the rest of them are negative reinforcement thoughts. And then, and they said, the trick is, to be paying attention to how you talk to yourself, right? Like that's if you can't control the 60,000 thoughts that you have to a degree, you can control how you talk to yourself, right? How you deliver for yourself. And so that's a hard thing to accept for a guy from Philadelphia, right? Who, I don't need to practice self-love, right? I don't need to do good things for myself. And I don't need to be vulnerable, like all that stuff. So, but all you have to do is just try it, right? And the experience will drive you to a better habit, right? I have my ego response of that's kind of, I don't know, that's not for me, to like, well, what do I have to lose? And then having the experience of like, yeah, just concluding with myself and having better conversations will lead me to a better state and a better experience internally. And that all what we all want anyway is just peace, right? Like peace. Imagine that.
And I love that approach. I mean, like, what do you have to lose by dedicating 2 weeks to it, a month to it? And when we think about reprogramming anything, I always equate it to like a computer system, right? If you think about shoving that much processing through any computing system, let alone your brain, it's going to you'll get that little spinning wheel if you have a Mac. And so if you can reprogram it to not have that level, whether you're cutting down the number of thoughts and then it's positive instead of heavy or negative, then all you're doing is optimizing your system.
That's right.
Why wouldn't you do that? It just makes sense.
Right. Right. Agreed.
So thank you for sharing that.
Yay.
Now, I want to redirect a little bit here to your passion. Now, I know business and people are a huge passion, and we will touch on that, but diving deep into a core passion and something we've talked about quite a bit, and that's human trafficking and sex trafficking. And I know you have a nonprofit that you're engaged with that's really involved in just ending this cycle once and for all, if possible, but at least making a dent in it to the best of your ability. Can you talk a little bit about that and what brought you to being engaged in that?
Yeah. So, truth matters, right? So a lot of people want to skirt around the truth and frame it differently and candy coat it and call it something different. But, sex trafficking is the most egregious thing happening on the planet, period, end story. In my mind, when it hits me, when I hear about it, I just can't think of anything worse. I can't think of taking a 6-year-old innocent girl or a 2-year-old innocent girl or boy and having somebody manipulate them or abduct them and put them in a place where they're getting violated, having their innocence taken from them, and being changed forever, right, to the worst. And so I had sat down with 2 guys from a organization called Hope for Justice 3.5 years ago, maybe 4 now. And I asked for the details, right? Like they were talking about a lot of stuff, and it was all super compelling and interesting and riveting and terrible. But I want to know the details, right? And the details are, in my summation is, as we are talking right now, there is a 30-year-old man that is raping a 6-year-old girl somewhere on the planet. And that is like, that's not okay, right? When you say, well, I'm an anti-sex trafficking, people go, oh, that's good, right? But when you say, and no, and this is what's happening, then it hits you in a place that makes you want to do something, right? And so, we had a 2-hour conversation when it was all said and done. And after that conversation, I was never the same, right? And after that conversation, which was 4 years ago, I'd never stopped thinking about it, right? Daily, it's on my mind and wondering, how can I make a difference? But what was interesting in the conversation with them is they had said, he goes, now take that feeling that you have and your want to go do something. And here's the problem is after we leave this table, 95% of the people that we talk to who had that kind of heightened experience of wanting to do something, we never hear from them again because we got too busy with our lives. Right. And I heard that, right? And I knew that. So I have been a outside supporter of Hope for Justice. One of the things that I did is, you try and think of what you can do that's going to create the most impact, right? So, when I donate money with an expectation that wherever I donate it is going to not just get sucked into the vortex of whatever their needs are, but to help them grow and be more effective. And so we had flown Hope for Justice from Great Britain to Florida to do a Tony Robbins Business Mastery Conference. And they had 5 of their top executives sit through a 5-day immersive business mastery program that really the impact was enormous, right? It was more than, like, if I had written a check for $35,000 to them, it would have helped them, but it wouldn't have impacted them, right? But sending them to a place where people can speak into business practices and efficiencies and getting out of the weeds and getting more into your core competencies, really, I know has helped them cast a bigger net to save more girls and boys out of slavery. And so, that drives me to want to do more with that. So, we do regular calls with the CEO of Hope for Justice and help drive more opportunity and better strategy and more effectiveness. So it's a terrible thing. More people need to be involved in it. And, if you have a kid, you have a responsibility, right? If you don't have a responsibility to help end trafficking, then you have a responsibility to keep your kids a little bit closer and understand their vulnerabilities and the way that these kids are getting groomed on the internet or being groomed in school or whatever. Like, as a parent, you need to be in your kids' lives, especially in this day and age.
Agree. When it comes to Hope for Justice, if someone is looking to learn more, to get engaged, how would they learn more about Hope for Justice and what they're doing, their cause?
Right. Well, I mean, hopeforjustice.com would be the place to start. They have several safe houses across the world. They're based in Great Britain. They have a branch here in Nashville and another one in Iowa. And they work with Amy Grant, actually, who's the Christian pop singer who's like really, really good and really, really has a heart for trafficking. And they have a great approach to trafficking, where they help rewrite policy at government level to going all the way down the streets and rescuing children and putting them in safe houses. And then from safe houses, moving them into transition of healing and hope and a brighter future. So, hopeforjustice.com would be the place to start. And then on that website, it'll send you to a couple different places to find ways to help.
That's amazing. And as a parent, you had mentioned that it's important to be educated, because often we think this is only happening in third world countries where kids are being taken off of the streets. Is that you're finding? Because as you mentioned, it's be informed and educated, because this might not be the case. Is that true? Is it happening all around the world and not just in third world countries?
It's happening big time. I mean, it's huge in the United States. It's huge. The target is foster care children, or broken homes, right? Broken boys, broken girls. One of the approaches that they have is, some of the real bad guys will hire young boys to go start grooming girls, and from there kind of bring them into their fold and then turn them out into sex trafficking. Grooming online is really, really big, because they just set up robots, and as soon as they start getting bites on people that are interested, you start emotionally manipulating them, telling them they're beautiful, they're hearing things they never heard from anybody else, and I'm going to take you to the moon and back, kind of thing. And why don't we meet, right? And then one of the things that they end up doing is that they build enough rapport with these girls, they'll have them send them pictures, right? 13-year-old girls that are exposing themselves in some way, and then they'll turn around and take those pictures and say, if you don't meet me at a certain time at a certain place, I'm going to post these all over the internet. I'm going to send them to all the kids in your school. I'm going to send them to your parents. You're going to get in trouble. You're going to get embarrassed. You're going to get humiliated. And oh, by the way, I think it's geofencing, where they actually figured out where they live, and now we're going to come to your door, and we know that you have a younger brother or a younger sister, right? And so they manipulate their loved ones to try and get them to do things that are just egregious. So yeah, it's big, and it's terrible, and it is happening here. Like I live in Colorado, in Denver, and at I-25 and I-70 is one of the biggest interchanges for women that are being trafficked all over the country, because from that intersection, you can go out to San Francisco, LA, Chicago, New York, Minneapolis, and there are just people sitting there waiting for these girls and to transport them to other parts of the country.
Yeah. So again, here, many people, and I've experienced this in conversations, they feel that it's not our problem. It's something that happens somewhere else. And what you're saying is, no, it's not. It's something that's happening everywhere. And so it's all of our issue to resolve. And even if it was happening somewhere else, it doesn't matter. It's an issue of mankind.
That's right. That's right. And the other thing, before I forget, so the other thing that they do is, as soon as they get them in their fold, right, they immediately drug them. And then they get them addicted to either meth or heroin or something, and then they have them, right? Because then they created a dependence. And there was one situation where, and I'm not sure whether this girl was groomed online or not, but this girl was at a Mavericks game in Texas with her father, right? Her father, and she gets up and goes to the bathroom, and somehow this guy who was waiting somewhere near the bathroom abducted her, and within 5 hours had her in Oklahoma City from Dallas with nude photos on the internet, and had her trafficked within 5, 6, 7 hours. Right, just like that. She left her father, went to the bathroom, and I don't know how she was manipulated, but she was abducted against her will, and off she was in a hotel room 6 hours later, and that happens often.
Yeah. And so education of the parent, because I'm certain that father didn't think, I'm at a game with my daughter, this could happen.
Right.
And so it is so important for us to educate ourselves as parents, or even as someone who cares about someone, on how these things are occurring.
That's right.
Because we shouldn't feel unsafe to go to a game.
No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. And the police don't understand, because they said, well, she just ran away. So she got no help from the police. Luckily, and I don't know what organization it was, but one out of Texas, had an AI software that they started running through all the pictures on the internet of her face, and ended up finding her in Oklahoma and rescued her like 3 days later. But 3 days is too late. I mean, thank God they got her, but 3 days, that could have been 10 or 15 or 20 guys that had been with her before they rescued her. I have a daughter, 14 years old. I can't even imagine what that would, it's in my mind, I can't wrap my head around what that would do to her. So yeah, it's real. It's bad.
So when we consider empathy in the flow of this, and I know you and I have had conversations about this offline, it's so easy to desire to say that parents in these countries who are selling kids into these sex trafficking situations are monsters, or that the situations where these are occurring, like to really make it more about how bad these people are. But you had the empathy to go down and actually check out the situations and the scenarios that were creating this situation where it might occur. Can you talk a little bit about what you found? And when we talk about fixing a solution or creating a solution to fix a problem, part of what we have to do is see the root cause, right? Anytime we have to understand the root cause of what's occurring. Can you talk about some of the root causes that you found and how you felt when you discovered those?
Sure. So, if you take the United States, right, I just kind of talked about some of the root causes: broken families, foster care, runaways, right? And whatever family problems cause those problems for those kids to be put in compromised positions is one of the things that happens in the States. And runaways is a big one in the States, where there's guys walking the streets looking for young, vulnerable girls and, get them on drugs, and then that's it. So then went down to, has spent some time in Costa Rica. And if I by no means am I an expert on this, right? The only thing I have is experience, because I think, if you're interested and you want to do something, you can't make decisions from the chair, right? You have to make decisions from the field, right? You have to, if you want to be effective, you've got to have the experience of what's happening on the streets with this, right? And so, we went down to Costa Rica and spent some time, a lot of time in the tin shack communities, where actually a lot of the people had escaped from Nicaragua to these tin shack communities in Costa Rica. So if you can imagine, and these places were awful, right? I can't imagine how bad it was in Nicaragua that forced them to want to go to a tin shack community in Costa Rica. But, after we had to get permission from the gangs, like we had some locals who were very connected in the community, and they kind of took us through a tour of these areas. We had to get permissions from the gangs to walk through and have their protection to make sure that, we didn't get shot or killed or stabbed. And when you walk through, there was 3 and 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds that were sitting in these tin shacks, and there were no parents around. There was a dirt floor and no light, and sewage running through the streets, right? You hear about it all the time. And I'm like, well, I don't understand what the hell is going on here. And so, in those situations, the fathers are on drugs or on alcohol, and they're completely out of the situation. And the women have a choice to make. They can stay home and maybe or maybe not get a meal for their kids, or go to work in the coffee fields for $1.50, $2, maybe $3 a day. In order to do that, they have to leave their kids alone, and then expect the community to take care of them, which they don't, right? And then come back 8-10 hours later and then go feed their kids and be with their kids, right? But they're exhausted, right, from working in the coffee fields all day in the heat, and then they got to deal with their kids who are so needy at that point, and just to feed them. That's terrible. It's just I can't believe it, right? And so but the other problem is then there's predators within the communities that are taking these kids and trafficking them, right? But the desperation of poverty will cause people to do things that you wouldn't ordinarily do, right? Like, there was one woman who she was sold into slavery by her parents at the age of 9. And when I had heard that before, I thought, well, those parents should be shot or killed, right? Literally, that's just how I feel. I am what I am. And then when I saw what poverty could make people do and the desperation and the hopelessness, they're shells, right? They're people without hope. They're people without a plan. They're people without an avenue to move into something better. And they're just surviving. They're not even surviving, they're existing, right? It's beyond that. And so, when you find out what really happened with that one girl, because I ended up meeting her 30 years later, she was rescued by an organization, and she became the head cook of this organization. She made the best banana bread in the world. She was so awesome, right? But the family couldn't feed her. The traffickers came in and told the family that we're going to take her to a better place. We're going to give her another opportunity. We're going to put this kid in school. Whatever it was they promised. And then they gave them a little bit of money. And so they get rid of their daughter in the hope that she could have a better future, to be turned into a sex traffic victim within an hour after they bought her. Yeah. And then you understand, right? It's systemic. The poverty caused that. That family had some money, they would have never done that. They would have never sold that kid to a better opportunity. So there's always more to the story, right? And it's and then you do have empathy, right? You do understand, like, that it would kill me to sell my kids to a better opportunity to put them in a worse situation, of course, than anybody else. We love our kids. I wouldn't do that to my dog.
And ultimately, that family didn't know that that's what they were doing.
Nope.
But until you went there, saw the conditions, took the time to get to know the girl and understood, then it's so much easier to sit back and judge and evaluate the situation.
That's right.
And I feel like many of us do that. And that's why I'm grateful you're coming onto the show and talking about this. Because I do feel like so many of us hear about this through other avenues, and we desire to make monsters of people versus understand that, hey, there's a deeper root issue here, and one that we can all contribute to helping to solve, which is, okay, there are horrendous conditions that people are living in right now. What are we going to do about that?
Right.
So that those individuals, when people come up and say, we're going to take your daughter, your son into a better life, they're like, what better life? We have a great life. We have enough food. We have shelter. We have love for our children. We have a means to protect ourselves. The life we have is good. And so that no longer becomes the root issue.
That's right. Yeah, and to put it in perspective, like that, you take that, I never thought about this, but that particular family that sold their girl at 9 years old, if they had had $8 a day living in Costa Rica, that would have never happened. Now it was 30 years ago, right? So I'm totally unaware. But if somebody was giving them $8 a day, they would almost be rich, upper middle class in that world, right? And that would have had a totally different experience. And think of all the excess cash we have in this country, right? That could prevent something like that happening. And so, what can we do now to prevent it from happening to the next girl?
Exactly. What infrastructure can we build out? What can we do to fix the root problem instead of casting stones and creating monsters?
Right. That's right. I love that. I love how you put that, because truly I thought that they were monsters until I got there. And, not to say that, not maybe a minority of them are just straight monsters, right?
Yes. And that'll be true in any scenario. There
Right.
are always, and no matter what silo we're in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even in faith, in business, and there are always going to be people who ego has trumped everything else, and that occurs. But when we sit with it and we just keep digging and digging and digging and using empathy and heart and connection and compassion, then we can truly get to the root and begin to ask, how do we solve this? Instead of how do we judge each other for even creating the problem?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what I hear you saying in this organization, really going after. And instead of being blind to it because it feels uncomfortable. I mean, it's not a comfortable topic. And so we want to shy away from it. But that's not going to fix it either.
Right.
Because it's happening whether we want to talk about it or we don't.
That's right. Yep.
And so I appreciate you being willing to come on and talk about it.
Yeah, the first step in anything is awareness, right? And then if your heart is struck to do something about it, then now you're responsible, right? So whoever's getting exposed in this is aware, and if you feel something in your heart to go do something, go do it, right? And you don't have to do something big, just do something small. And then watch that get addictive, right? Watch that become an experience in and of your own that will just want you to generate more experience of that, right? Because helping people, saving people is there's really no better experience on the planet, right? When you do so much for yourself, if you just take a portion of what you do for yourself and do it for somebody else, it can really kind of throw a nice experience in your life.
Great. So can you talk a little bit more about the organization and what they do specifically to get in and help?
Yeah, so Hope for Justice, it does a couple things. The thing that I'm very interested in right now is they have a branch of their company that has an operation called Slave Free Alliance, where they do supply chain investigation for large corporations to make sure that the corporations that to give them a stamp of approval that the investigation's been done in their supply chain, and they don't have any slaves working in their supply chain. So that's not sex exploitation, but it's still part of freeing slaves. They have safe houses in Africa, in Cambodia, and they have an operation here in Nashville, where they have some very high level people that do investigations into people that are exploiting children, to create the cases to get them convicted. Right? They rescue, and I don't want to say rescuing is hard enough, but it's easy compared to what you have to do after you rescue them, right? If you don't have a place for them to land after they're rescued, to where they can get the healing therapy that they need, then they just get recycled back into that world again, right? So they're big on awareness, they're big on public policy, and they're on the streets just making things happen everywhere.
And so if someone was seeking to get involved, donation is a great way, because I'm estimating it takes a fair amount of funds to do all of the things that they're doing.
It does. And I don't know what it costs per dollar to save kids. But I know that funds are an issue. I know that volunteers are always wanted and needed in some capacity, and awareness and support.
Okay. Do they ever need materials, supplies, or anything like that as they're bringing people back into the fold?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't know the answer to that, but I think the website could speak to, basically, it has a section of how can you serve, where can you serve, right? And then, it'll give you all those options and then you can plug yourself in.
Okay. And the website again?
Hopeforjustice.com.
Okay. Perfect. We'll make sure that it's like all over the place too. So all someone has to do is click the link and go straight there.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you for talking about that for a majority of our conversation, because it's the thing that I love. I hate talking about the most, but I love sharing as much information as I can with what I know to help get people involved where they don't even know that they have an entry point, right?
Yeah. Well, and I would offer, even once we started talking, it was one of those things that when I started going out and researching just so I could be educated about it, there's not nearly as much out there in this area as there is on like cancer research and all of these other things that are very predominant. But this is such an epidemic in and of itself that there should be. So we need to start voicing it. We need to start making it as much of a topic as anything else, because, you and I have talked about this. There is this parental thing that goes on when you are just so connected to your children that you cannot imagine what it would be like if something happened to them. And I know so many parents feel the same way. So for that to not be a topic and there not to be more education to protect your children in this way, that is just in your face constantly,
Yeah,
we need to make this more on the forefront.
absolutely. Yep. I'm all for it.
I'm grateful that you're bringing it out there. And I
Wonderful.
know we didn't touch as much on the business and the people in front, but this very much kind of, in my view, does go in alignment with that, because you've created a strong business and uplifted people to direct it to be able to support what you're doing here.
Absolutely.
And so that when we met you and we knew that your heart is just, you're like a big walking heart.
Wonderful. No, businesses have a social responsibility, right? It can't be all about profit. It's got to be about giving back. It's got to be about making a difference. It's got to be about impact. And, for me, like after I had taken all the trips and bought all the t-shirts and had all the experiences, I was always about service, but I was like, well, what the heck is next? Right? Like what is next? And it's not next like a new business. It's about how do I balance my business out with social impact, right? And there's a true responsibility to that. And it's a shame that more companies and corporations don't do that, but they have a responsibility to do it, and they're not, and that's kind of a shame. And I just feel grateful that I am, and feel grateful that I got the awareness to start redirecting attention, time, money, and space to causes.
We're grateful too. It uplifts humanity, which is kind of what we're about.
That's right. Kind of.
It makes us happy.
Kind of a lot.
So my final question to you, and I just mentioned, we see you as a giant walking heart. That means that in our view, you are a perfect example of a heart leader. And when you hear us call you that, what does that invoke in you? What does that bring forward or mean to you specifically? Because we all interpret things differently. So what does being a heart leader mean to you, Tom Brown?
Well, responsibility, right? That's what invokes at me. For one, I shy away from that. I told you if I could just be anonymous for all my life, I would love that. I'd love to not really talk about much what I do. But yet I do, because there's responsibility there. So, being a heart leader is about, they're like, just always had this idea like, you're going to change the world, right? No, change the people that God puts in your life today, right? Have the impact. Let them, people walk in our office, and whether they're customers or they're suppliers or they're manufacturers, and truly when they walk out, they're like, there is something different about that place, right? And it's intangible, they can't tell it, but they want to come back, right? They want more, because when you walk in, you're like, this place isn't all about roofing, it's not all about profit, right? It's all about people, it's all about connection. And you never know the one word that you're going to say to the one person that steps into your life that day, that they're going to need to hear, or that's going to redirect them in a way that's going to make a difference.
Speechless. Yes, on so many levels. Yes. And I can completely understand the humble nature of not desiring to make it all about you. But as you so eloquently said before we started recording, sometimes there is a need to shine so that that light can be so bright that others feel it and remember the light that they have within them.
Mm.
It kind of sparks, and that creates that cascade effect, because then they take that light and they're shining, and it sparks the light within the people around them. And that's what I get from you. You have created this epicenter of light, even through a roofing company, not something people would feel like, oh, I'm going to go to a roofing company and feel uplifted. But that's what happens. And so then that light just continues to permeate from there. And so very grateful for that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for being on the show. We'll make sure every link that you provide is all over the place so people know how to get engaged and contribute in whatever way feels appropriate for them. The most important thing is to get involved, however that means. So, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all so much for tuning in to another episode of the Heart Leader podcast, where heart and mind align. I am your host, Amber. And don't forget, we have the Heart Leader Toolbox available to you. And this month, all focused on empathy, means that we have a free resource dedicated to empathy. So you can hone that skill and really begin to connect with those around you. Until next time, I look forward to seeing you in the Suivera community.